episode of SaaS Leaders Lounge, and today I'm joined by the co-founder and CTO of Astrix Security, Idan Gour. How are you doing, Idan?
Great meeting you, Paris.
It's nice to have you on the show, and I'm excited for you to share your insights into the industry with our guests and also what led you to co-found Astrix Security. But just before we start off, I just wanted to first find out, how's 2024 been for you and the Astrix Security team, and if there is any planned trips to RSA and upcoming conferences.
Great question. So 2024 kicked off pretty well for Astrix. We actually increased our headcount from almost 20 employees to more than 50.
Wow.
With extreme amount of people here in the US. I actually myself relocated to the US just a couple of months ago, living now in Manhattan. And looking forward to the rest of 2024. We plan to visit, every major city that exists. Obviously, be part of the biggest conferences that are out there, especially RSA, Black Hat, DEF CON, and so on.
Exciting times. And how have you found the transition from Israel to New York? I know the weather's definitely different.
Yeah, the weather is definitely different, and it's better from different perspective. Like it's being closer to our customers over here, being closer to our American employees that are most of them new to the company. There is obviously a cultural difference that when you build a global company, you actually need to attend to and bring the right culture in order to satisfy for that. That's one of the main reasons why I'm here.
Exciting. And I guess that move to New York, being closer to the customers and the employees really, enables you to take that next step. And more importantly, you mentioned culture. And I know a lot of the top performing businesses and fast growing businesses, culture is one of the key things that, needs to be embedded, in a positive way for businesses to really accelerate that growth. But before we dive into the world of cybersecurity and Astrix Security specifically, I would love for you just to give a bit more information to our listeners about your background. I know you started, in the IDF and then moved to Deep Instinct, but I would love to find out where, that passion for technology started, and more importantly, how that first role at IDF came about.
Yeah. So I think that the passion for technology started already in a very early age. I was a Lego kid, being crazy. Today we have all sorts of virtual Lego, if you would like, but back then there weren't many virtual Legos. But I was crazy for everything that Lego related. And growing up in Tel Aviv, in Israel, obviously very oriented to the technological space. I was doing deep learning in 2006 when it wasn't that cool back then, being part of different projects in my high school. And then actually went on to the army, joined an elite academy for counterintelligence officers. I was in the army for about 10 years in total, did both work in the world of technological analysis of major strategic weapons, then moved to the cybersecurity field, but was very technical and technological mindset as well. I left the army after 10 years, being a major with a lot of experience and different really groundbreaking projects that I had the privilege to be part of, some of them to lead as well. And I actually wanted to find, coming from a more offensive side of the house to the defensive side of the house, I wanted to look for things that could be extremely different from a technological perspective. And that's why I joined back then Deep Instinct, which had a technology that could allow attackers actually to face defenses that they wouldn't imagine. It was a very cool technology. I was there as a low-level developer, at some point as a product manager, in addition to what I did. And when we looked into Astrix and what we want to do, we can talk about it a bit more during the conversation. We actually wanted to look for other challenges that exist and where are huge gaps in the way that organizations secure their environments, and what does the new trends of technology actually means, and how they create these gaps as we build our virtual world all around us.
Interesting. as you mentioned, I guess at Deep Instinct, you had, the possibility to wear many different hats early on. And, you got to see how things worked from the other side, as you mentioned, from more of the offensive to the intelligence piece. And I know Deep Instinct are well known for their, threat intelligence solutions. And as, time went on, when was it that you really decided that, you wanted to go out and build something new and approach a different set of problems as such?
Yeah, so I think early in my career, I was very much on the side of the builder, meaning looking for different needs, understanding how the pains look like for different users, and then try to find relevant solutions for these specific problems. Um, the other thing that happened along the time in the army, well, I was mainly in this position, but it's very different being in the army in comparison to being in a more civilian space when the entire world is open for you to discover a problem that is important enough and try to solve it. So I would say that sometime along my latest years in the army, it was already kind of clear that probably the next thing that I'm going to do is would be outside of the army. There is a path. There is a lot of things that you want to learn before you take the responsibility of being a founder, being responsible for lives and customers that you have, which I think that Deep Instinct for that perspective actually helped me to bridge some of the gaps or thoughts or lessons that I wanted to learn. And obviously, there are so many things that you learn along the way.
Thanks for sharing that. And Astrix Security, I guess, are making significant strides in the non-human identity security space. So for those that don't really know what that is, could you maybe simplify that and explain how you're able to address those challenges in the market?
Yeah, so in general, to people that are not familiar maybe with the cybersecurity space, when we talk about non-human identities, it's every time that something asks access to your photos or to your email, they promise you they will do data optimization, or you could look like queens or kings with new AI capabilities by having access to your photos. In order to provide the data that these solutions, products, features sometimes need, you actually grant them access to your private information, to maybe more public information as well sometimes. But this all initiation of access or granting of access is actually providing a non-human access to something that you now own. When you think about it from an enterprise perspective, when you want to use new technologies and to establish this all connected space for productivity, for automation, and so on and so forth, it's mostly the same, but just in huge amount of scales all across the systems and environments that an enterprise might be using. So that's in general, yeah.
And would you say for enterprise level customers, for example, is it mainly sitting around the API keys that this non-human identity security is kind of focused around that area? When you're integrating many different tools like SAP, for example, with Google, you're going to need API keys to be able to ensure that there's security. And is that where the Astrix Security solution sits?
Yes, so in order to connect things together, there are API keys and auth tokens and technical accounts or service accounts and so on and so forth, different types of connected tissues, if you would like, or credentials, another word for that, that allows this access to happen. And frankly, when you ask the security side of the house for these enterprises, do you know how many non-human identities have access to your GitHub? Do you know how many privileged accounts exist, not human accounts, privileged accounts that are automatic accounts, have to your Salesforce? How many secrets exist in your secret managers that you are using in your production environment in AWS? In many of the cases, there are no real answers to that. Obviously, when you start to ask in which cases third party maybe have access using these credentials, how does a typical behavior look, what's an anomaly, really nobody collects the information, nobody really knows what's going on for major services. And what's striking in this perspective is that it's kind of weird, because when you ask how many people, how many users, how many human beings, how many admins do you have, the answers are it's not amazing, it's not great every time, but are much clearer. Do you have ability to detect anomalous behavior for a human that is now accessing from a different location? Yes, of course that we can identify that. And the non-human identity side of the house, it's very much void to all levels that exist for enterprises today.
And you mentioned companies and products like GitHub, how many users have access, etc. And how important has it been to develop these partnerships with the likes of GitHub and Slack, Salesforce, Google Cloud, some of the big, software out there that people are using on a day-to-day basis at enterprise and a personal level, and how is that helping Astrix to support their customers with these partnerships?
Yes. So in general, at the end, these organizations, these companies, very big brands, companies, they provide some level of abilities for the enterprises, their users, from that aspect, to gain some visibility. It's not always that straightforward, and it's not that easy sometimes, but they do try to do it. And we are working, in different partnerships with some of the names that you have mentioned in order to better utilize, better understand, better also explain where are the gaps that potentially their customers are having when we are trying to help them to secure their non-human identity access, and we're seeing different attacks that are happening in the domain, understanding better the tactics of different attackers that are trying to take leverage of this underserved domain. But it's critical to be able to work in a good partnership and explaining, also sometimes praising. If somebody, if one of the big vendors has managed to pull another security feature into their platform, they fought on it very hard with every other feature that could have been chosen instead. And in some way they managed to do it like this. They should be praised for that when it happens. It's also part of a good relationship and partnership that you have.
I agree. And when we look at Astrix Security and what their offering is, in the non-identity space, what sets it apart from traditional, more generalized solutions?
So I think it's a lot about focus. We understood that the main underserved area of identity security today and in the last couple of years, and potentially in the next years to come, is this area of non-human identities. And as I was saying, it starts from the very basic inventory questions to a more contextual question to behavioral questions, and so on and so forth. So everything that the industry, vendors, customers, the Gartners of the world has done around human identity is lacking radically in the non-human identity space, especially in the amount of non-humans that are outnumbering humans in like 10 times to 45 times more, depending which number do you take. But like the amount of if you just count the gaps, all right, how many of these that are secured in comparison to how many are not, it's just immense amount of identities that are missing this kind of security.
I agree. And now I want to ask you, for some of your personal insights and professional insights as well around, security and Astrix. So as a co-founder, you're also the CTO, which I guess, is kind of leading the engineering product and those kind of functions. What unique perspective or experience was important for you to bring to the table when starting Astrix, and how has it enabled you to successfully lead these teams and elevate the work that's happening internally?
Yeah. So in general, I think that there are many things that I can think of, but in general, I would say that the very basic thing is, what is the need? Like, why should we do what we are doing? And it's right from the very basic understanding of like, why should a company like Astrix exist to start with, right? And then after we understand why in general we should exist, all right, what specifically should we do first, and then second and third, and later on, and not today, so on and so forth. So having this mindset of looking for the needs and making sure that everybody in the company is sharing the same question all the time, like, why are we doing this? Is this the most painful need that we're actually trying to solve? How does it happen? So that's like one thing. So first, be curious, try to understand, where is the pain that is it. The second thing, which I think that comes together with that, is trying to be a good listener, right? If you try to look for needs and you don't listen when people tell you that it hurts them or that it's a problem from them, okay, it doesn't work. You can continue to search for needs how much as you want, but you're not really going to be able to get some answers. And that's another thing that I think that is very important, and the way that we act internally, but also externally with our customers, our partners. We really try to understand. We really try to listen and get a good understanding of what do they need, how do they see things, what is a good feedback that they provide us. When there is some criticism on things that we do or we could have done better or earlier, and we try to take it internally in order to improve ourselves continuously.
Amazing. Curiosity is something I've heard time and time again. To be successful, you need to have that urge of curiosity, and even within a team, especially a small startup, when you're growing, you want people that are willing to have the entrepreneurial mindset, but willing to go above and beyond to solve those problems. And we all know the key to a successful business is not just having a product and being able to execute on what the customer what you think the customer wants, but really listening to the voice, having a voice of customer in your head at all times, thinking how we can integrate the feedback we've got from different customers to elevate the offering. And as a product manager back in Deep Instinct, I guess you had a chance to work on specific features, and that enabled you to understand the importance of product market fits and being able to minimize burn rates early on when developing that initial prototype.
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, I would say that we got a lot of support. We have great angels investors, and we managed to bring also advisors that are very helpful from a product market fit perspective. I think that in general we had great partners at our VCs that were asking us good questions about our product market fit, and especially when you are the first company at some point, the only company that is out there doing something. And some people might tell you that you are actually should be doing something else, but you're telling the story and you see that people are nodding, right? Just like you nod now, and people are nodding, and you see that you provide them some information and they're actually taking action based on this information, and it helps them to move forward. All right, so you're on one side keeping discovering and trying to understand what's going on, but on the other side being persistent in the way that you're explaining the reality that you see and creating kind of a new reality for your customers, and see if there is a good alignment. If everybody says you're telling a story and everybody tells you, oh well, listen, you're crazy, I don't want to work with you, okay, maybe this story is not a good story, right? But if it's not what they say and they actually know that they actually operate, all right, there is a way to go forward, there is a way to keep looking and understanding what do you need still from a product perspective, what do you still need from understanding the market perspective. These are all kind of things that are relevant. And it's important to say that for Astrix, when we started the company, the macroeconomy situation was very different than the macroeconomy situation that exists today. The market was rising at that time. There were a lot of budgets for organization, for new innovation and new solutions and new products and so on and so forth, security wise and non-security wise as well. Today, the macro trend is very much different on a macro level, and yet it's still a huge gap. And we actually saw many more attacks that were happening in this domain than before that it was, in a more, let's say, happy market situation. But still, the need exists.
I agree. In an aggressive market, when conditions are different, sometimes you're going to face more attacks as people become more desperate to break in and steal data and identity. So that is a situation we're facing now. And I guess you mentioned, advisors and VCs, a lot of cybersecurity companies specifically, but we look at others outside of security, have benefited from, venture capital specialists and advisors coming in. Would you say when you was telling your story of what Astrix is and where you want to take it, was there a shift in direction, having spoken to the VCs and advisors, I guess having that external expertise and, knowing what works and what takes companies to IPO or acquisition, it kind of maybe shifts slightly the strategy that you have in mind, maybe not the core goal, but the strategy maybe shifted slightly. Would that be the case at Astrix?
So I think that one of the things that our advisors and our VCs helped us at the beginning was actually to sharpen our message. We had a broad message. We still have a broad message, but the real thing is that people only have that little of attention to things, and they have so many things that they need to prioritize, and it's very challenging. And first of all, if they don't get it right at the beginning, all right, you are off the list. Let's say that they got it. All right, they understand what you're doing now. In order to be a successful security product, you need to be like top three, and not top three in the next 2 years, top three in the next couple of months of things that people want to invest and to do. And it means that you need to understand how the priorities are actually look like. What are like things that resonates well? How does, if you're talking to a CISO, right? What's the voice of the board in order for you to understand what the CISO cares? What are the words that you might be willing or needing to talk with the CISO in order to get his attention, for instance? So I think that a lot of the time it was mainly about focusing the message and making sure that the most important things are the things that we're saying, and that we continuously saying the same message. Not saying, all right, that's an important message, that's an important message, that's an important message. Let's just do a round robin sharing these messages. No, pick one that you really believe that is the right one for that. Always check it, all right? But if it works, all right, continue and iterate on that. At some point, you can expand your message and maybe provide more value for other things as well.
And it's interesting that you mentioned CISOs as people that you talk to and try to understand what their challenges are, because from what I've been listening to recently over the last few months, a lot of CISOs have been saying that IAM, identity access management, is usually one of the top things on the checklist when they are going through regulatory and compliance things. So that is something that obviously works to the advantage of Astrix Security. And I guess just going back a little bit further to the investors and aligning on advisors, I guess when people have a shared interest and want to bring additional value by knowing the industry, being able to sharpen that message, it really cuts through the noise. And that's something when there's cybersecurity companies opening nearly every week, you need to be able to cut through the noise, right, and be able to identify what people's problems are and really clearly and quickly identify and share what the message is and the objective and goals are for your product. So I'm glad that you were able to align with some great advisors and VCs there. And just as we move to the exciting part of product development and innovation, we know Astrix, offer a huge range of capabilities from, real-time NHI discovery to threat detection. Can you highlight a particular feature or innovation within the platform that you truly believe is, especially impactful for customers across a broad spectrum?
Yeah. So first, I want to address something that you mentioned, which is, it's the perceived situation versus the reality. And you mentioned, and it's highly related to the question that you asked. You mentioned that CISOs name IAM as one of the things that they need from a compliance perspective or from a regulatory perspective. The fact is that it's when we talk about the identity space or identity security, there is also another word that is a prefix to this identity space, which is human identity. Right? When we say, normally people in the industry say identity or they say IAM, they normally mean the human identity side of IAM, right? So that's also true for regulators. It's also true for compliance frameworks, so on and so forth. The non-human identity space was underserved for organization because it was too hard. At some point, maybe it wasn't that important as well. There are no tools or solutions, so it's very hard for a regulator to tell somebody, all right, you have all of these humans that you need to certify. You have 45 times more non-human identities. We ask you to do that as well. It's like, all right, this doesn't scale. We will not do it. So there's also kind of a relationship that exists between the regulator or different compliance frameworks to what actually is achievable, because you cannot just fail everybody from that perspective. And that's a big challenge. And I think that, when we're thinking about different types of technologies and what we're actually able to help organization with, is first to, replace the people that needed to go count and collect all of these non-human identities and understand what's their level of privileges and so on and so forth. So that's one thing. And we do it across, cloud and SaaS and on-prem for different organizations, whether, it's third parties or other solutions as well. So that's like one key thing that, saves ton amount of time if you try to bring the same principles and ideas of your IAM program to the non-human identity side of the house. And the second thing, all right, now that you have everything, there are too many of them. Like, on which one do you actually need to look and to understand that they are the ones that pose the highest level of risk for your organization? And the ability to come with an out-of-the-box, subjective risk analysis that obviously is customizable by the customer is a key value that we can provide organization in order at the end to get to digestible numbers of things that they need to solve.
Nice, well put. And in terms of the cybersecurity industry, it's constantly changing day to day. We find cybersecurity professionals firefighting more than being able to in advance kind of pre-predict what the next threat will be and be able to approach it with the right tools. So in a rapidly evolving landscape, how is Astrix able to stay ahead of the curve in terms of innovation and adapting to emerging challenges and threats?
Yeah. First of all, I think that it's a big challenge for every technology company,
Exactly.
specifically a security company, which, most of the times the attackers are in the shades. They try not to be seen. They try not to have their tactics known. But what help us to still be ahead of the curve are probably three things. The first thing is that we have people that are very curious. They really want to understand what's going on. They are very critical. They want to make sure that they understand things correctly and they get the whole picture of things. The second thing is that we try to learn. We try to read, the relevant data, the relevant data points, to drill down to every attack that we see, in the entire landscape, but specifically also in our domain as well. And the last thing that is important in order to achieve that is actually be able to educate more, because the more that you educate other people, there is a higher percentage of understanding of them, of the topics and the domains and the areas of your expertise, and they can come and suggest with their own ideas based on their own experience from different types. Like, the best thing that we get sometimes when we have our engagement with our customers talking about the problem space that we are tackling is that all of a sudden, once they gain a little bit of a deeper understanding, they're able to come up with new ideas for the product or new attack scenarios, and they are trying, or they are sharing something that they knew from their previous lives, whether working for the CIA or some other organization. I'm like, it's actually another something that is related, and and we start to talk about it and we learn from their experience because they manage now to translate that into our problem space and our domain, which makes us smarter at the end and sharing more information together.
I love it. It's truly amazing what you mentioned there about being able to communicate, educate, and really together share ideas of how you can make the next generation even better at approaching these attacks. And I know RSA is a prestigious conference that many cybersecurity companies attend, and I know in 2023 Astrix were finalists in the Innovation Sandbox Awards, and I'd love for you just to tell me what that was about and how you guys managed to become finalists and what that meant for you and the team.
Yeah. So first, I would say that we were pretty surprised. So because that's how it is sometimes, because you are the only one that is doing something. There isn't no competition. There weren't other companies in the past that were doing non-human identities, and you're resharing a story that that is already successful, and you're trying to compete with that. It was the first time, and again we know our customers, we know the traction that we have in the market, and we know like what our advisors see and say from that perspective. And we said, okay, we are going to tell the story the way that we believe that the story is. Try to maybe make it a little bit simpler because it's just a 3-minute speech that you have there on stage, but this is the story, this is the blind spot, this is the gap that we want to share with the cybersecurity community and explain to them that is happening right here, right now. And organizations are going, like, in the last year, since the time of RSA, I think that there are more than 16 publicly known attacks that are in this specific non-human identity space. We feel the urgency to share with organizations that this is an existing gap in their program. Even though they invest huge amount of efforts and resources, they simply leave this as a complete blind spot. So that's what we tried to convey when we submitted, the all of the paperwork and the recordings and whatever that we needed back then to do in order to get to that stage. And we were super excited. I remember myself waking up, seeing, this letter from, there's email from the RSA committee over there with like yellow highlights saying that, all right, you are finalists for that. And I was like, all right. When we were actually, back at the day, we were just supposed to arrive to RSA, just the two of us, my co-founder Jackson, who I appreciate the most, and myself. And all of a sudden, within 3 weeks, we had to understand that, all right, this is going to be a huge event for Astrix. We shifted from 2 people to 7 people, almost everybody that we could take from the team. We didn't have a booth or planned booth before that. We actually bought a booth. I took it with myself from Israel the weekend before because we weren't sure if these 4 luggages, which were the booth itself, are going to arrive safely to the US. And the event itself was great. Jackson pitched on the stage beautifully. We had a lot of great traction during the days of RSA, and I think that up until now, it's really a great symbol for us of being bold enough to tell a new story to the security community and explain what we do. And I think that it allowed us really to gain a great push and pull from the market from that perspective, and potentially be able to educate about something that we still consider to be a blind spot for organizations.
Congratulations again. It was, I guess, a big achievement for you and the team, especially early in that, journey for Astrix. And as you mentioned from our earlier part of the discussion, when we talked about educating people, getting in front of such an audience and really being able to tell the story of, what, Astrix are really trying to identify as the challenge and how you're going about solving those challenges, I guess really enabled many people in the industry, especially experts that maybe knew about it, but not to the depth that you were trying to educate the audience, allowed, for greater coverage. And, hopefully again this year, you can have a booth there and, educate more people about what Astrix are doing in the market. And you mentioned your co-founder Jackson, and something I always like to talk to founders about is, that everyone talks about the wins and, the success story, right? But not the late nights and, the pulling your hair out moments. So I just really want to understand and see from your perspective how in the early days, the decision to have a co-founder, how important that was, especially in those tough moments, and, any advice that you would share for, aspiring founders, whether that's cybersecurity or other tech founders.
In general, I think that it is the most important decision that you are going to make founding a startup. You can pivot, you could change the problem, you can do all sorts of things along the time. You can hire and rehire different people. You can live at your hometown or somewhere else in the world. But I think that the partner, the co-founder or founders that you have decided to go on this journey with is something that is very hard to change. And when it does change, it's highly problematic for the startup and for the business and for the leadership and the belief of what's going on in the organization or in the company. So first, it's the most important decision that you have, and I definitely believe that if it takes you some time to find your co-founder, it's okay. Like, take the time to find the right co-founder. Talk about things that matters for you. Make sure that you have a good alignment on what you are trying to achieve, what you believe, how some of your company is going to be. Why are you taking a specific position and your co-founder is taking another position? Are you in good alignment with that? Jackson and I, we know each other since we were 17 years old. We have done quite a lot together in the army and afterwards as well. We are friends. We are real friends. And when we founded Astrix, before we founded Astrix, we actually worked from the garage for almost about 8 months. At some point, when we were on the decision point of, all right, are we going to do it together or not? We even had our own, private workshop talking about, the goods, the bad that everybody has, and what we can share and offer to each other in terms of support along the way. Like, you need to be, in my opinion, very, very transparent with the people that you are starting this journey with, and obviously the ones that are joining along the way as well. But the co-founder, the founding team, or your co-founder is extremely important to be the right guy that you can find.
Truly inspiring, and as you mentioned, having that deep rooted relationship with Jackson for many years really enabled you to understand each other's strengths. And I guess especially when founding a software business, it's always important to complement each other, not to have the exact same skills, but to have, bring different skill sets to the table to address different challenges along the way. And I guess, in the time that Astrix has been around, when you were scaling the business, what would you say was the biggest traits, and important lessons you learned when hiring? Because, especially in the first 10 to 20 to 50 people, every hire is even more critical, right? You can't really afford to get it wrong. How were you able to identify the type of people that you were bringing in, and how much value were they able to bring immediately to the team?
Yeah. So I think that we always divide, this assessment into two parts. The professional part, right? Okay, you want to have like experts, professional people, quick learners, because things are going to change, and so on and so forth. That's super important. That's one angle. You must have the right people from this perspective. The second thing is that being professional is not enough. Working for a startup with the dynamics that exist in a startup, the pace that exists, the level of curiosity for a thing that you need to have. Actually, it's a lot about personality. And some of the things that we are highly looking when we're talking with candidates, and sometimes it could be great professional people, but they're just not having some of these traits, is really being energized and self-motivated. And you can see the fire in their eyes when they want to do something and to take something forward. Or you ask them about an experience that they had in which they tried to change something, and you just feel it in their voice, like how much did it care for them or how much it didn't when they tried to do it. And these are the most important traits that we are looking in the people that we work with. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they are extroverts per se. People could be very much introvert, but with great passion to do things. So it's nothing about the external necessarily. It's just about how much things important for them. How much are they willing to put themselves in the line of fire in order to change something that is valuable and that they believe that it should be different. And that's like the most important thing, maybe that we are looking to find in the people that we hire.
Thanks for sharing that. And just as we move forward slightly, what's on the horizon next for Astrix Security? And is there any upcoming milestones or initiatives that you're excited to share with the audience?
Yeah, so I think that in general, in cybersecurity, normally we are most security initiatives to some extent are very much shift right. Okay, you have already connected something, you have now a non-human identity that is problematic, it's already connected, it has access, maybe we managed to catch it with our anomaly detection and so on. But the question is about how do you shift left as well? Like, how do you make sure that you raise the awareness for people when they think about it, that they are going now to provide continuous access to something? How are you choosing in the best way that you can the different vendors or suppliers that you are now integrating and bringing to your system? So everything that has to do with not just post analysis of what's already happening in your environment or could potentially go wrong, moving to pre-analysis, bringing advices, bringing our information, bringing our databases and the insights that we have from there in order to make sure that you build your environments in the best way that is possible, or that you change to a better solutions that can provide your integrated space using these non-human identities in the way that they are configured is a big initiative that is part of what we're trying to do, moving not just from the what we call the post-integration side of the house or the post-connection side of the house, also to provide everything that we can for the pre-connection side of the house, enabling administrators, enabling developers, enabling RevOps managers, and so on. So they could choose the tools that they have. They can create less security issues or security problems as they are, carving the way into productivity, eventually reducing the amount of security challenges or friction that exist when you try to solve problems after they have already created.
That's what we all want, right? To reduce the friction and the risk that we all face. So if I'm looking forward to seeing this initiative play out over the next weeks and months. And just before we move on to the quickfire section of our podcast, I just wanted to ask you to share maybe the biggest success Astrix has seen so far, and maybe what the biggest lesson as founders you've learned.
Yeah. So I think one of our biggest successes is actually with our customers, with some of our enterprise customers that we service today, and the ability for us to become like an important security player in their security stack. And most of them have already, the best of breed for many different types of security challenges that are there. And our ability not to operate as a siloed solution, but actually be part of their ongoing processes, their ongoing, SLAs, to service really the customer in a great way, and to continuously think together of like how else could we provide extra value, and have it as a conversation rather than a pitch that I as a vendor come to share with them, is a great achievement. I think it's for the entire team. It's customer success, it's sales at the beginning, it's R&D, it's product, it's marketing, right? And the ability to really build relationships that are lasting and are valuable for both sides. And the lesson that we learn from that perspective is, as I said maybe earlier at the beginning, it's really about caring on one side, listening on the other side, and executing, right? If you care and you listen, but you are not able to bring anything to the field, all right, you are just going to have like disappointments. But when you're also executing on the most important things, all right, then, the relationship could be built and you are actually providing the value.
Amazing. Nice to see we're all on the same page. And just as we move towards the quickfire section of our podcast, the first question I'm going to ask you is, what is your favorite type of food, Idan?
Probably pizza.
Is there a specific type of pizza that's your favorite?
Pineapple pizza. I'm vegetarian, so no meat, but pineapple pizza.
And a lot of people have that debate whether you put pineapple on your pizza, but you've answered from your perspective that pineapple's definitely a must on the pizza. And if you could go to anywhere in the world as a holiday destination, where would it be?
Good question. I would go to Italy.
Oh, home of the pizza. And have you been to Italy before?
No, that's the reason.
Okay. And do you prefer reading or listening to books?
Reading.
And what would be your favorite book?
There are a couple of books that I really like, but I think that one of the most important ones that I read in the last couple of years was The Hard Things About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. I think it's a must for founders. It doesn't really prepare you to what you're going to have, but it gives you some insights to what could potentially happen.
Perfect. I'll be sure to read that myself. And the last quickfire question I have is, if you're a music lover, what would be your favorite album?
So in general, I love electro dance music. I like everything that has to do with it. So I don't know, it doesn't necessarily go by albums over there, but there are a couple of really good producers.
Amazing. And is there any hobbies or interests that you're really passionate about?
So I am an amateur photographer, actually, mostly landscape and nature. It doesn't get as much as I would have wanted it to be in these days, but that's a good place for me to relax.
And If you have a question you'd like to share for the next guest, I'd like you to share that with me now, and then I'm going to end by asking you a question from our last guest.
Yeah. So I think that the question is like, what did they find or he found the most important thing as he was building his first team? What was the most important value or the most important trait that he was looking to build as part of this, common values for the team?
Amazing. I'll be sure to ask it to our next founder. And the question from our last guest is, we all look forward to changing, the industry for the better. And what would you like to fundamentally change for the next generation of practitioners?
I think that in many cases, practitioners are actually kind of overlooked when we think about the products that are provided. There is a big shift, I think, that is happening in the market today. Practitioners are becoming much more important in the decision making of choosing good solutions. It's part of the entire process or trend of bottom-up adoption of solutions and the PLG space in general. But I think that when you think about practitioners in the cybersecurity field, SOC analysts, vulnerability managers, identity people, all these kind of people are in many cases are not being provided with the best tools that they could have in order to automate, solve, and be more efficient. And it's a big thing that we should definitely change, because at the end, these are the people that stay the after hours. These are the people that are missing time with their families because something else could have done better. These are the people that at the end really move the needle for the organization, for the security perspective, or for, in many cases, every perspective. Everybody are important, but these are some of the people that do the work.
So if we could help to automate, their workload to give them a bit more time in the day, then that would be what you would be leaning towards for the next generation.
Yeah, making them more successful in what they are doing, saving them time so they can focus on things that really require their creativity, their genuine curiosity, and attention.
Thank you for sharing that, Idan. And I want to thank you for joining us as a guest and sharing your amazing insight and journey with Astrix Security. And just before I let you go, if for anyone that is, potentially exploring non-human identity solutions, what would be the best way for them to get in touch with Astrix? Would it be via the website or to connect with you or Jackson directly?
For sure, yeah, they could either through the website or just send the LinkedIn request, and we can definitely connect. We like meeting new people.
Amazing. And you're based in New York now. What's the next event that you have on your agenda?
I think it's most probably RSA, but things are moving fast in startups. Then potentially I'm going to be in somewhere else before.
Well, hopefully you get to visit a lot of the different states in the US. I know Texas is a big one. California is obviously massive as well. So hopefully, if you haven't already been there, you're going to make some trips there in the next few months. Vegas, obviously, for the big conferences, and I hope to see you there as well. But for all of our listeners and for myself, I want to thank you, Idan, for joining us. It's been more than a pleasure having you, and I look forward to reconnecting with you again in the future.
Thank you very much. I really did enjoy the conversation, and looking forward to it.
Thank you very much. You take care now. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.